All right, we're live. Cool.
Nice.
Should be coming through. You can tell me if the audio sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah. One sec, I'll test it. Oh, talking? Me talking? Hello, I'm talking? Oh, I'm a little low. You talk now.
Hi.
Oh, maybe I can turn this up. Oh, yeah, you're a good volume.
Cool. Okay, let's keep it then.
Yeah, how do I turn myself up?
Just like the gain on your microphone, if there's a little knob.
It is all the way up. Is there anything in Streamlabs you can do? Because sometimes that's a pretty relatively easy, like desktop audio or something like that.
Let me turn you up in.
I think, because I do think it might be a slightly different.
Let me just turn you up in Discord. Oh, can't do that.
Yeah, just so you know, your screen is on.
Yep. Yeah, just doxed myself a little. Here, how's this? Try again.
Well, here, let me see. Talking. How's it? Talking.
Hi.
Hi.
You sound fine to me.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's fine. Yeah, it seems to me like I'm a little quieter, but it's probably not like an actual. Yeah, you just don't want it so people have to like put down. This probably. We'll rock it and see.
Cool.
Anyone. I said though.
All right, talk to me about Joe Rogan, my favorite person on the planet.
Well, I just thought it was funny I mean, not funny, but just given like stuff you and I had talked about, like it was interesting him taking his own episodes off of Spotify, and I was curious what you thought of that. Yeah, I was curious what you thought.
Pretty surprised that he would do that, to be honest. And
Yeah.
I looked through the list of all of them, and I didn't really understand a good portion of them. I didn't agree with any of them, but I didn't understand a lot of them.
Because I didn't look through all of them. They weren't all. There were like 70 something. They weren't all times where he said the N word.
I don't know that. Damn,
Okay.
could you imagine if I had that kind of knowledge?
Some people were saying that, but I wasn't sure if they were. I know there were like a number of instances of him saying the N word. Too many, I would argue, by whatever number it was. But I don't know, and I know he took down a lot of episodes, but I don't think he was taking the episodes down because it was like a problematic guest or something. Because I think they've already done that like a while back. They took down like a few episodes because of who the guest was. I could be wrong, but I got the impression it was because him or I don't know. I guess that's an unknown. It's whether he actually said slurs.
Not sure. So if you're,
think of his explanation, because I watched his like 5 minute sort of explanation.
I don't think he should have done it. I think that was like chumming the water, so to speak.
I don't know what that means.
Like chumming the water is like throwing like fish guts and stuff in the water, and then the fish go crazy for it.
So I think his explanation didn't make sense to you, basically.
No, I think that it came off as an apology, and I think that that's the wrong approach in his position here.
What's the right approach?
Don't apologize.
So his logic does not add up to you. Like when he says it's a word that even though I was not saying it to anybody, I thought that was okay. Now I realize it's not my word to use regardless. That logic doesn't
correct. I don't agree with that line of thinking. Though my guess is you do. Am I right?
Well, no, of course I do. It's already the line I was already, I think, saying.
Yeah.
Pretty similar. It was the exact same thing I was saying. I just thought it's notable that like it obviously one of the largest public figures in the world, I guess you could say, has been forced to get to this point.
Why don't we give context? Just to assume that unless people don't know, maybe playing the supercut is not necessary. But Joe Rogan in the last like I don't know month.
I didn't even watch it. I'm just gonna be honest. I didn't even.
Oh really?
Yeah. I got the picture. I watched his apology. Sure. I'm like, I don't need this.
So Joe Rogan has always, I guess, had criticism as well as a lot of followers that like him, but fairly recently, in the last couple of weeks, there was a supercut compiled of him saying the N-word. My understanding was sometimes it was in quoting some people. I think actually almost always it was quoting people, but perhaps not always. And then some other comments that were added to that, such as like, I got out of my car, it was like Planet of the Apes. He was referring to an area that was predominantly black. And
Did you find that offensive? Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
What's up?
Did you think that was offensive? That should be apologized
for? Can we get back? Okay. I just want to give context. Okay. Before taking a view. Okay. And the supercut, which was like spliced together over years and years of him doing his podcast, was, I want to say it was shared by Indie or something. She's an artist on Spotify. And then it's looked like it got a lot of traction on social media. Blew up over like a day or two to the point where Joe felt like he needed to say something. He recorded just a selfie video of like I would say a public apology. It was a soft apology. It wasn't like Maoist struggle session, like, I really understand the error of my ways, like, please, I'll never be this bad again. But
yeah, I don't know what Maoist struggle session means, but I agree. It was like taking some accountability, but like walking it back here and there, but then taking more accountability. And it was like, as a non-fan, I was like, that's the best I could do.
Soft apology. That's what it feels like to me. Yeah. And my understanding is that issue didn't really stop there. So there's been, I guess, more talk for Joe to self-censor. So I know in some of his recent episodes he's now like bringing on, when he brings someone on who's a contrarian, he's immediately bringing on someone else that is more mainstream, so to speak. He did this with respect to climate science very recently. Mm-hmm. And let's see, what else is he doing? Does that sum it up, I guess? Yeah, sure. He took down a bunch of episodes. How about that?
Yeah. So self-censoring and having opposing views, those are not equally bad, I would assume. I mean, like, you sort of lump those together, but I assume you see those pretty differently, or...
Self-censoring and having two people with opposing viewpoints? Yeah. I mean, I guess I still see...
quieter.
Are you?
I just want to tell you, maybe I think you should turn your mic slightly down, and then it would be, yeah.
Is this better?
Okay. Yeah, let me see. Is this better? Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, I just want to make sure it's like, watchable. Sorry.
No, I think they're both forms of him responding to criticism, through self-censorship or through having people on that he may otherwise not have on his show.
Right.
But no, they're not quite the same thing.
And self-censoring, how has that been?
Just through like taking episodes down.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant, but like, yeah, I thought you said that like now moving forward, you've noticed like self-censoring sort of.
No. I've noticed him just in the last like week bring on people that I think he otherwise might not immediately bring on.
Yeah, I saw something online. He had like a climate scientist, like an actual scientist on. Did you watch it? I didn't watch it. Or is it not aired yet?
Yeah, I watched both. I watched the one where there was a theoretical physicist, ex-BP guy, that was on. That was like climate science is boy, I'm going to distill a lot of information. But first guy was like, climate change is occurring. The Earth is warming. There is a component of it that is due to humans, though this guy was casting a lot more doubt on what we should do about it and exactly how much of it is due to humans, whereas the second guy he brought on, which was a professor from Texas A&M, was much more, I guess, mainstream narrative, what you might hear around climate change, that it's like a climate crisis. The change is 100% due to humans. Um, we have to act now, or else we're screwed. Yeah,
Right.
those I guess would be the two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Do you think that's a good thing that he's having a climate scientist on, or I mean, to inform like one of the biggest audiences in the world? Because you call it the mainstream narrative, but like at a certain point, it's a census. Like, where's the line between one?
Ooh, should we talk about climate change?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
I've been meaning to ever since we started talking because I remember it
Sure.
was one of the topics that we considered talking about.
Yeah, I think it's good for him to have on opposing viewpoints. I think it gives the listener a more whole picture. Because, I mean, this is
Yeah,
even the way our justice system is structured. You're not supposed
yeah,
to actively just try to find the right solution. You're supposed to bring in opposite ends, and ideally, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. So,
yeah,
for something that is as polarizing as it appears climate science, climate change is, I think
yeah,
it's a good idea.
yeah. Yeah, I agree because I mean, like I get that, it's not entertaining to like have a climate scientist on every week and like talk about like climate change and how we're in a crisis and we need to act now. But like you can do it once in a while, you know what I mean? Just to like remind people like, yeah, this is a pretty big deal.
The guest that he brought on that was a climate scientist was definitely not his type of like typical person to have on, and it showed. Normally
Really?
the person's a lot more willing to express self-doubt, more receptive to questions. This guy came with like a full PowerPoint deck, and he was like, go to slide 11, you can see
Wow.
here. So he was well prepared, but
Yeah.
it came off as a lecture. I felt
Yeah.
like I was back in college. It was like a lecture more than it was a discussion between him and
Yeah.
Joe.
and 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 yeah, and I mean, there's a huge issue with like obviously how scientists explain things. I would say they just need more opportunities. Get more scientists in there. You get different personalities. Once in a while, they're going to be super personable and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, like just to go back to Jordan Peterson because it was something. I mean, that was one of the main clips people took from his Joe Rogan thing, at least on the left, is the part where he's talking about the climate crisis. And I thought that was such a perfect encapsulation of like how he doesn't approach issues helpfully in my view. And I imagine based on you not feeling great about his conversation that time, that maybe that stands out to you. But like when he approaches an issue like that, he says, "What is the climate? It's everything. Everything's the climate. So we're measuring the climate, but we're not measuring everything. We're measuring just specific things, and we're limited." So it's this argument that like if science is limited, then it's I don't want to say not worth doing, but it's almost like pointing out the limitations and not highlighting the fact that yeah, things are always going to have limitations, and still we have to work with our working hypothesis as we sort of approach things. But yeah, I guess I don't know what my question is. Did that stand out to you as something like problematic the way he talked about climate change, or do you think that's a good
You talking about Jordan
way?
Peterson?
Yeah, yeah,
I don't
not
think that distinction made any sense when he said
okay,
that. Like,
yeah,
what is the
like
climate? It's everything. I think what he
yeah,
was getting at is like we're specifically talking about average temperature of air and oceans, whereas
okay.
the Earth's entire system is more than just that. I think that's the point he was trying to make, but came across as incoherent.
Sure. Fair enough. So yeah, so what are your? I mean, like your views. It like tell me if I'm wrong, but like it's not exactly a crisis, and like with technological innovation, we'll be able to like I don't know, like capture carbon from the atmosphere, or like in other ways, kind of like.
Maybe.
Or is your feeling that we don't need to act significantly now, or it's hard for me to tell from how you? Because
Um,
I'm obviously not an expert, but I just.
I definitely have a heterodox opinion on like climate change, but it's not quite along the lines of like Green New Deal, and it's not quite along the lines of like don't worry about it. Like the Industrial
Right.
Revolution happened, we adapted, it's fine.
Right.
We're not cyanobacteria. We can't just adapt to any sort of environmental change.
Oh, for
There's so
sure.
many
Yeah.
assumptions built into the climate arguments. It's like For example, is human life worth preserving? If we do warm the climate and we screw ourselves over, is that actually a problem?
I think a maybe more important like sub question there is like, do we have the responsibility to future generations to
Yeah,
preserve the
that's a
like
good way to distill it. Mm-hmm.
yeah, because no, and I don't know either, but like I don't think we need to know that human life is worth living or whatever. It's just like it's just like, is harm being done? And you don't even have to look to the future, to be fair.
Yes, harm
Like
is being done.
yeah,
100%. Even if you don't
yeah,
look at like the actual temperatures, whether or not they're getting warmer,
right,
we are polluting our air that we breathe, our oceans
yeah,
that we swim in and eat from. Like, we fuck
yeah,
up the climate, whether or
yeah.
not that's through temperature change or not.
Right. It's clearly an issue, and like it just gets into so many interesting. It's honestly probably the most profound issue. I don't know. I can't think of an issue that's bigger.
We
Like
just fuck it up for ourselves, though. So I don't think it's the biggest issue. Something where we could impact, like, the nature of reality, so to speak, I think is, like, maybe more
what
important.
can, what can we do? That's how do we do that with
Like,
anything?
splitting the atom is a start to that, I
Okay.
would say. Like,
Who's gonna split the atom if we're no? But like I'm sure there's other things, but like it's the most practical one. Like even like um, it relates to everything like refugee crises, like storms. Like
hmm.
do you buy the storms connection? Because some people like don't think that there's a real connection
I,
there.
I
I
don't think that we know that for sure, no.
have you ever looked into it? Because like according to like agencies that track this stuff, there is measurable like increase in severity and frequency in storms. According to like one time I looked into it for like an hour or something. That's what it seems like.
How do you
According to
measure
the
that
information,
anyway? Severity of a storm? Because that
I,
seems like an
we
important metric.
I could look it up. I think they do probably like a bunch of different measures, probably like wind speed, like
Mm.
rain amount, stuff like that. But no, yeah, I only looked into it for a bit, but like I go to legit sources and they say like, and I find studies. You could look it up, you know. So like, it seems, yeah, and the question of like, is something proven is an interesting one because like, how proven does something have to be for action to be worthwhile when inaction could be, you know, harmful and stuff.
Totally catastrophic. I was gonna make an analogy to like when you hear on the weather, you check the weather, like, oh, 50% chance of rain tomorrow. Do you bring an umbrella or not?
I'm so I've always been so bad with umbrellas. I just like always forget to bring them everywhere
I
I
don't
go.
use umbrellas.
But so your point, no, exactly. Like you have to consider the risk inherent in the decision and then take that into account. Um, I mean, it seems to me like this argument that like climate scientists are incentivized by like grants or other things to make climate crisis an issue. You hear that argument. You genuinely hear that argument from people on the more right wing side of things. Like, oh, climate scientists are incentivized. To me, that amount of incentive is minuscule compared to the incentive that I see from people who like oppose action against climate science. Who you can literally find it's like, oh, they are literally employed by, or like an XBP guy who's like, who knows, is he trying to go for some lobbying thing or something like that? But like often there is some very clear, this person literally works for the whatever foundation, you know. So what all my point is, I see much more clear incentives from the people opposing climate change, especially short-term incentives. I mean, you know, it's important to act to preserve the climate in a way that doesn't like unnecessarily hurt businesses in the short term. I do think that's very important. Like you have to take people's livelihoods into account, but I also think that people like I guess my point is yeah, people are too incentivized by the short term.
Sure.
Like yeah,
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I don't think there are too many apparent motives to like mal incentives to promote that the climate is changing due to human
right.
causes. There are probably some arguments I could make. I mean, the federal government is looking to make some pretty colossal investments into renewable energy sources, so being on the forefront of that could be quite profitable.
No
Being an
doubt,
expert, having clout, like there are incentives, but
no doubt. No doubt.
I think there
Even
are
just being
probably
seen as a good person, like type
sure,
of thing. Sure. Yeah.
but the other way around, I think, probably provides more direct incentives, just because there's an industrial, um, I don't know, you get to be part of the industrial boom that exists right now.
Right.
And that's probably
Yeah.
more profitable. Maybe.
Yeah.
All right, my view on climate change, because I didn't really say it clearly. I
Sorry.
think it is.
I'm
I think
getting
the
there.
climate is warming. I think it was warming already before humans hit the industrial age. I think after the industrial revolution, it began warming more quickly. That's what it looks like based on the average temperature data that I've read online.
Yeah.
It seems like it's happening at a rate such that a few degrees average temperature change will happen in the next couple hundred years, and that's large for our
Hmm.
planet, for the delicate balance that life needs.
Yeah.
I think that our best bet to mitigate this is through technological innovation. I think that that's our best chance out of this. I don't think that regulating people into cutting down is going to work. I do think that perhaps subsidizing newer technologies um, might be the right answer. But I find a lot of people blindly following this like a religion, thinking that Teslas are going to be our savior or something like that.
Oh my
Um,
God. Really?
yeah, I think that that is like a type of person that I
Yeah.
see kind of parroting this narrative of like, climate change is really bad. Buy a
Yeah.
Tesla and you'll help fix it. And they feel like if,
What?
if I bought my Tesla, like, I did my part. Like,
Yeah.
it was pretty bad before, but now it's a little bit better. That sort of
Yeah.
perspective, maybe I'm caricaturing it, but
Sure. Sure.
that sort of perspective really grinds my gears. I'm very
Yeah.
skeptical of that kind of behavior because it drips of followership and religious adoration. And
Yeah.
anytime I see that, I think like heliocentrism or something, right? Like
Yeah.
early uh, missteps that humans made. So I think technological
Yeah.
innovations are our best shot at fine tune controlling the climate,
Yeah.
because even if we do cut down consumption locally, like in America, that doesn't change the rest of the world.
Oh, for sure, for sure. But there's a lot that could be done. I mean, I don't know that much about like the international stuff. I don't know that much about a lot of this. But like, I imagine that the U.S. could probably do a lot more to encourage other countries. I mean, we're pretty freaking powerful. I'm sure we could figure out some ways to
Like
we get
what?
countries. Well, I don't know. I mean, I even just like saying, hey, we're gonna organize a conference where we're all gonna try to make this commitment, and here is us making this
Like the
commitment.
Paris Climate Accord?
Yeah, yeah, something like that. I mean, that's like super minimal compared to what needs to be done. Like even like I think even the goal they said is not. So I'm trying to like remember what the exact number is, but it's almost like I think it's like 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius above the Industrial Revolution, where we're very close to that, and it's almost like a point of no return where it gets very difficult to like imagine how we could bring the temperatures
Yeah,
down
like a
to such a
runaway
point.
effect. I mean, that's what happened to Venus with their
Right.
greenhouse gases.
Really? I didn't know that. And then there's like other stuff that I don't know, but like topsoil and these other sort of aspects of the environment that are running out, methane in the atmosphere, like different sort of sub issues that I don't know. But anyways, yeah, I guess I imagine the U.S. can do things internationally, whether it's the Paris climate or literally like using other diplomatic mechanisms to try to, I don't think we should like sanction a country if they don't reduce their, like fossil fuel consumption, but things like in that realm where we can exert influence in some way without, punishing like regular people or something like that. But even just domestically, yeah, like it would still be worth doing, like just for setting an example and like just getting ourselves ready for the future. I mean, really, because yeah. So, but yeah, I don't think it's I wouldn't want to make a either or between like technological innovation, or a decrease in consumption, because you have to decrease well consumption and just like fossil fuel production in general just to make it more doable to get the technological innovation. We can't make magic happen, but we have a lower bar of innovation that we need to get to if we can reduce our, the way we're exploiting fossil fuels now. Um, so I don't know. It's one or the other, but I don't know who's, no one's benefited by, not calling it a crisis, in my opinion. It definitely should be called a crisis.
I don't. I just don't. I'm not sure. Like we're coming at it from the same point of look. Like I don't think we see the problem the same. I'm not even necessarily sure that I see it as like a a bad thing. Like if the
Yeah.
population, if half the population dies out in a couple hundred years, I'm not necessarily sure that like sustaining Earth's biological capability, like its ability to sustain life as we know it, is really something we should be trying to optimize. Perhaps our like the way to salvation is like ditch our biological origins, upload me to a robot, something like that. That would be one way out of it.
But that can't be done.
Why not?
Not yet.
Not yet.
So how long until that can be done, and
Can't,
how much
you
unnecessary
It can't be
stuff?
done yet, but you also can't cut hydrocarbon usage either.
Right. Well, that's more possible, wouldn't you say? I mean,
Not
like
to a
that
developing country. I mean, you'd literally be asking people to just die.
I don't know that that's fair, and this gets into stuff where I'm not well informed enough to maybe argue.
Population growth is directly dependent on energy consumption. And if your population's growing, you're going to require more energy. In areas
Yeah.
that don't have the infrastructure for various forms of renewables, you have to use hydrocarbons.
Yeah, I believe that. I just don't know that developing or whatever, like smaller countries are the biggest problem with climate change. I mean, I know China, India, US are like the huge big countries, and you could say that China and India are developing it to whatever significant extent, but like I I guess I don't think it's like an all or nothing. I think there's like a reduction sort of approach where you're not asking people to go without necessarily. You just have to find ways to supplement their needs with less harmful ways of getting energy. So I don't know if that's like I would be a fan of like rich countries like the US to doing a huge tax and taking an enormous amount of money and investing in renewables for the entire world. I don't know how that actually works. It's obviously just a thought, but something like that where it's like I view it as the bigger, more developed, like advanced countries' responsibility to reduce the amount of suffering that is going to be by
From a geopolitical standpoint, that's not a good move, and that's probably why it hasn't been done. Like, you give up a strategic advantage in terms of bolstering your military
oh
if you
yeah.
do that. You're taking resources that could have been allocated somewhere and you're essentially subsidizing technological progress for the rest of the world at the expense of your own I don't know, superpower ship. And
Right.
that's not a good strategic decision. And if someone
Right.
were to do that, they'd probably be ousted out of their political post quite quickly.
Don't you think that's a problem with the world we live in, that
Yeah.
it's not strategic to do something that could be really
Yes.
helpful? Yeah.
Yes, that's a problem. Yes, I think
Yeah.
that's a problem.
So, so how do we create a world where countries are incentivized, or people in general are incentivized, and businesses are incentivized to do something that would reduce harm? Because I get your point of like, what's the big deal if we can't support this many people, and in 100 years we have like the number of people? Like, I get that. Like on the face of it, that like there's nothing wrong with that. But then you think about like in that 100 years, you have how many people suffering unnecessarily, and like whether it matters whether we have 7 trillion or 4 trillion people in the world or whatever, doesn't matter. But trillion,
Billion, it's
sorry,
okay. Doesn't
trillion.
matter.
um, doesn't matter. But what matters is like unnecessary human suffering. I think that's fair to say. Like I don't, because if that doesn't matter, then literally nothing matters. And Yeah. So yeah.
Maybe that's like just where I'm coming from, a place of like minimizing total human suffering isn't that important to me.
But then nothing's important, and I can embrace that perspective of like nothing matters, nothing's important. It's just not one that you can like make policy on or live your life. Like, do you agree, or do you feel like there's a way to have an ethical system where other things matter but unnecessary
So
things don't?
like there's a good you ever hear of like the stamp collector robot? There's this guy like Number File on YouTube. I think he's
Oh,
kind of funny.
oh no, I never
I
heard of
watched a video a few years ago of like problems with AI, like early warnings with AI. It was like if you made a stamp collector robot and you programmed it to just collect stamps, seems like not like one of the most innocuous robots that you could possibly have, right?
it.
I'm trying to draw an analogy to your positing like minimize suffering.
Yeah,
So you tell it to collect stamps. At first, it like what does it do? Okay, it goes on eBay and buys a bunch of stamps, mails them to your house. It's doing great. Then it improves a little bit. You give it perhaps access to buying businesses. So maybe it buys a logging business and it starts cutting down trees in order to like create, right. So like if it's really
yeah,
trying to optimize for stamps, like,
yeah,
well, if I need to make more stamps, perhaps I could, like, where does carbon come from? Okay, humans, like, I could liquidate all the humans, turn them into
and you
stamps.
have a matrix situation here where people are being
Right,
yeah,
just from something innocuous as a stamp collector.
yeah,
So, like, if you're not
yeah,
able to impose morals or some sort of ethical compass on
yeah.
an optimization function, you can quickly go bad very quickly. He does a better job than I could, but that's the gist. So if you're trying to
And
minimize human suffering, there's no better way than to have no humans, right?
no, because look.
But
Well, yes, I just want to say I get where you're coming from. I think you're critiquing utilitarianism, right?
am
Like
I? I
that's
don't know. You're the
because
philosopher.
I think you're critiquing the idea of utilitarian, and I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but you're critiquing the idea of like solely focusing on quantitative human suffering or something like that, like making that the sole focus. Because your argument is that if there's one sole focus, no matter what it is, no matter how good it sounds or neutral it sounds, you can't go at one thing fanatically or all the time, or else you're going to cause unintended consequences.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
yeah,
think that's a good summary. Yeah.
yeah. I agree. I think you always need to have principles when you're going about like anything. Like it reminds me like I'll try not to make a huge detour, but I have a video where like I made a video about an argument I had with this left wing creator in their chat on Twitch because they were talking about like how like China taking over Tibet like helped Tibet and like was like minimize suffering because Tibet was like a slave owning feudal society and China and Mao helped them become a less suffering society. And my argument was without knowing everything about the history and without wanting to dig into the history, I don't agree with that on principle because it's wrong for one country to invade
Yeah,
another.
you don't like
Period.
imperialism very much.
I don't like imperialism, not a fan of it. And if it was genuinely to make that calculation that you're reducing suffering requires so much more work than I think people are willing to do. So they just like make assumptions. Oh, it's probably reducing suffering. But anyways, my point is yes, you need to have principles along with. Well, I guess it is just a principle in itself to minimize suffering. So you have to multiple principles kind of playing off of each other. You can't just have one. So like in this case, like minimizing your example of like wouldn't having no humans be the best way to minimize suffering? Yes, if we didn't have this other principle of like we can't get rid of humans, you know what I mean? Like that principle is there. You can't get rid of humans, which is a principle I genuinely believe. Like no matter what, like you know. So yeah, does that make sense? So like you take that principle and then you take the principle of like minimizing suffering, and then maybe you take principles of like, you know, we're smart. We're supposed to be thinking about the future. We have these brains for a reason, you know. But I don't know. Does that make sense as a response to your point? Because I think your
It
point is
does.
valid.
It
Yeah.
does. You're I I know I've probably mentioned him before, but Eric Weinstein, he's like fallen out of the public discourse at the moment. by his own choice, I think. But he had coined a phrase called the embedded growth obligation. That is this premise that in lots of our assumptions, whether or not we talk about it or not, there's this need for growth. You see it at the corporate level. You see it in the way that our politics are structured, Social Security, whatever you want to call it. Even our assumption that, like, well, we kind of need to keep growing as a population. In everything that we do, there's this obligation to grow. And so many systems are grounded in that assumption. I think I reject it. I don't think that we need to, like, why is 7 or 8 billion humans like the number that we need to have at a minimum? Like, no, you don't think so?
No, I don't. Well, am I talking about? Do you feel that what I'm saying is saying that we need to grow, continue growing?
I think so. I thought so anyway. At least maintain our numbers.
You're sort of either growing or dying, right? Like, I mean, as a society, like you're not just staying still. And I don't, it's not about maintaining the numbers of people. It's about, I guess it's about looking at all our principles and trying to think like what actions are most in line with all of them. And like my principle is not maximizing humans. I mean, I assume you can believe me. Like I'm not, it's not like I care how many fucking people are on the world. But none of us had a choice to be born. And like we have, it's somehow really wrong to like create a worse world for future people who are going to get born whether or not like we want them to. There are going to be a ton of people who are born in the next 20 years who are going to have to live in this world where it might be more difficult to live in. And so it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't see it as necessarily about growth, more just about of like making things habitable. Like
Taking care of the place that your posterity will live in is important to you,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah. Because and even if like humans and animals, like there was nothing better about humans and like
There
no
isn't.
ethical like
Yeah, there
yeah,
probably
like
isn't.
I think it's like a fair ethical question, but like yeah, even if there was no benefit to humans were no better than animals and so on, like I think it's still valid to say like there's like what's the downside is just like some people, a lot of people won't be able to maybe profit as quickly or something, and like I don't yeah, I don't feel like there are huge downsides to like preserving the planet. I feel like, well, I guess it feels like it's the right thing to do, sort of regardless of whether there are downsides.
So, what's your stance on Elon Musk's proposal that we must become an interplanetary species?
I think it's pretty convenient for him. It's a pretty convenient perspective for a guy who runs a space company, and
Well, I
you
think
know,
it's cause and effect. I think he started a space company because he thinks that.
I think maybe I don't know. I think he just likes feeling like the cool space guy. Um, my my perspective on him saying we have to become an interplanetary species is it's just going to be the rich and powerful planetary species. And you talk about like uploading your mind. It's like cryogenically freezing yourself. Like you have to be rich to do that.
And
And it,
anti-Semitic.
you have to be rich. Did you see the Elon Musk Hitler fucking meme he posted?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he deleted it. Well, I guess I
Yeah.
read about it afterwards.
What do you think of that? He shouldn't self-censor and delete his posts.
I think that the
Does that
comparisons
offend you?
to no, it doesn't offend me, but I think the comparisons to Hitler should be pulled out a little bit later. I don't think that we're quite there yet.
And he's framing Hitler in a positive light with that meme. Like it's a joke, but it's like,
Yeah, that's. I mean,
well, like
it's satire.
yeah, but like there are a lot of people who genuinely believe that. Like
That Hitler's better than Justin Trudeau.
there are a lot of people who like Hitler. There are a lot of Nazis.
Not as many people who dislike Hitler, but sure.
Sure, but that's expected. Like, anyways, what? I mean, yeah, he's an edge lord, but I no, but like his question, like that question about like interplanetary, it's just realistically, it's gonna just be rich and powerful people. That's my perspective. We really expect that like it's gonna be like, okay, we need to save everybody. No, it's just gonna be the meat
You've seen
inheriting the earth.
Elysium? Have you seen that movie?
Yes, that was a good one. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I didn't
you
think it
can
was a
get
great
that.
movie, but I think it depicted the stratification
Yeah,
of social class quite well. Yeah, I think
yeah,
so too. I think that if
yeah.
and when there is some sort of, I think it's going to start at the genetic level first. I think we're going to see the stratification through gene editing,
Yeah,
specifically like assuage. Is that the right word? I don't think that's
yeah,
the right
yeah,
word.
yeah.
Yeah, if
So what?
you're no, like massaging genetic code to
Oh, yeah,
choose
yeah,
certain traits that you want. If
yeah.
the rich people all start having 140 IQ plus babies and everyone else doesn't, I mean, you're going to see the stratification happen within a generation.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because that stratification, like, already goes on in so many other ways, right? Like, your
Less
richer
so.
kids go
You
to
pay for
schools.
better school, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But if
But
you,
no, you're
yeah,
totally right. Yeah, but that's why it's a really important ethical discussion of like gene editing and
I see it as a
like
foregone conclusion. If we don't do it, it's an interesting topic, but if we don't do
yeah.
it, certainly China's going to. They're not inhibited by the same moral dilemma that we are.
So what do you do? Then it's just like a race to the bottom type
Yeah,
thing.
it is. It is an arms race to the bottom. That's I think my view maybe that's probably where some of my view of humanity comes from, but it's mostly fatalistic. Like we see ourselves as this like budding intelligent species, but I see us as these like violent apes with slightly more sophisticated stones.
Both. I definitely see us as both. I don't have like a purely optimistic, view of people. But so do you not believe that any like international like diplomacy is like able to have any effect or anything?
I mean, clearly
Like,
it can sometimes, but I think it's
yeah.
pretty useless. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about the UN maybe briefly. I think the UN's a total joke. Yeah, like
Yeah.
the idea of it is nice, but in reality, it has no teeth.
Yeah, yeah, but I think it's not impossible to imagine that like an international body could be created. It's just we're not incentivized to create a body that would actually supervise the most powerful
I
countries
don't.
because they're
Right. Well, because we don't. No country would give up sufficient power to be ruled by some sort of centralized body, because then they wouldn't
right,
be able to further their own opinions.
right.
Yeah. Okay. Just
I
pointing out that China's on the Human Rights Committee for the
Oh,
UN,
it's
which
absurd.
is a
And
joke.
and I think so. What if? And I don't know that all the ins and outs of the UN and stuff like that. But what if like the Human Rights Committee, however it works, was completely different, and you had like a lot of the smaller countries have equal power, and same with the Security Council. So like I don't know that that would make a dramatic difference, but stuff like that, doing whatever you could do to take the power and make it spread out a little bit, so that decisions would be more based in common good rather
You'd
than
probably have robber barons start splitting up and creating their own countries so that they would affect like corporate lobbyism at the UN
Well,
level.
but why wouldn't that happen already?
I guess it's like one step more removed from that right now.
So, I have to pee and get more coffee, but I wanted to talk about like AI and jobs and tech.
Sure.
So we're like going in the right direction because I've been like reading about some AI stuff that I thought I'd share with you,
Have
and
you
then we can.
listened to any Lex Friedman at all?
I haven't, and I don't get the impression I would like his stuff, but I'd be open to check out like a clip or something.
I think you would.
I just. Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah,
I
let's
just get this.
come back in a couple minutes.
Okay, sounds good. ERB. voice is a slight.
Hey.
Hey.
I was just about to start streaming my chess game.
You go into Streamlabs and delete your devs.
I can't see.
You can go to edit moderation settings. Hey,
I don't actually see anything.
it's like 3 dots next to the chat in Streamlabs, or the settings icon next to the chat in Streamlabs, and then you should be able to go to like show moderation settings. Yeah, so when you're in Streamlabs and you look at the chat, then you go to chat settings at the bottom. It should be like a gear icon.
Yeah, it's still trying to connect to chat. It's like it's throwing an error.
That's odd. That would seem like it would be a Wi-Fi issue.
Yeah, it's still trying to connect to chat. Why is there a comment in the chat?
Yeah, it's just something that would be good to delete. Actually, there are a few. I don't even know. Yeah, I assume you're done.
Here, let me end the stream.
Okay.
I can't see anything in the chat.
Yeah, that's strange. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a. Can you click refresh chat? Because sometimes that's happened.
I can't see anything in the chat.
Yeah, that's strange. Oh, you know what you can do? If you go to, is there a clear chat button?
Yeah. Did it work?
Okay, nice. That's perfect. Yeah, that worked.
Okay.
It's all good. No worries at all. Okay. How was your break? It's all good. No worries at all.
Good.
Nice. But yeah, someone said my voice was in an echo. Is it? Let me see. Nice. But yeah, someone said. Oh, I wonder what. I didn't notice it. I can try headphones and see if I can notice it. Yeah, there were a few chats actually before when we were talking, but I didn't see what they said, so I don't know. I think we got some people coming through and then giving their takes, but I didn't see it. People hate it on Twitch when you don't react to their chat.
Yeah, still just endless connecting to chat for me, so I don't actually see any of it.
Yeah, that's happened to me when I have internet issues, but you're not having internet issues. Like, it's still coming through perfectly. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah, and I sound fine. I don't hear too much. Really. Anyways. Cool. All right.
You want to talk to me about AI?
Yeah, so I've been learning about AI specifically related to like copyright issues, and there's so much interesting stuff there. Like AI that creates music or creates images, like who owns the copyright to those images or that music that's created. Like I think it's usually the company that created the AI, but it gets tricky because sometimes a company builds an AI with data from other companies and they don't give those companies any rights to the product that the products that are produced through their AI. But basically it's just gotten me into like learning about this like cutting edge sort of field and how it's being regulated, which I just found really interesting. Because like too much regulation and you have companies don't want to work to create an AI and stuff because like what's the point if they can't own the product. But not enough. You could have I guess companies creating algorithms that I don't know could create so many, like you could have someone create an algorithm that creates so many different works of art that then humans in the future would not be able to create a work too similar,
a unique one.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Tower of Babel type, or not Tower of Babel, but the monkey writing whatever. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I didn't have much, and then so it just got me thinking about like tech and jobs in general because like for one thing, so there's AI that can master songs for you, and it's been around for a while, and it's just getting better and better. Like you can put in a song and it'll like master it for you, mix and master it for you, and that legitimately like will put sound engineers out of business, probably like smaller ones or many of them. And so yeah, I was just wondering about your take. I feel like we've talked maybe some stuff about this stuff before, but yeah, what's your take on like how tech displaces people's jobs and like how we should be sort of dealing with that?
Probably a UBI, but that's probably necessary but not sufficient. That's my really short take.
Yeah, like how does that? So you would just like, I guess you just start like paying these people a UBI who are displaced by jobs permanently, or I mean, well, yeah, I don't know. What do you do? 'Cause
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Otherwise, you're looking at a crazy destabilized society where if I know that late stage capitalism gets quite a bit of flack on the internet, but the fact that it still needs workers in order to function means that there's at least some sort of symbiotic relationship between person with capital and worker. But if
yeah,
you don't have a need for the labor anymore, you could completely disconnect that relationship, and I
yeah.
don't think it would look very nice.
So like, yeah, I mean, I guess in that money just comes from like other government programs or whatever.
Cut. I personally, I would want to cut Social Security, welfare, and Medicare and Medicaid, um, and institute a UBI instead.
How do you picture society working in that situation?
What do you
Do you
mean?
think that would create a more stable society that's like functional?
There you go again, trying to make the utilitarian argument. I don't know. I
Is
really
it so much
can't
to ask?
say. I can't. How could I possibly know that if it's going to be
No,
more
but then,
stable or not?
then what do you see as benefits? Because I
It's
just say
more
stable and
morally
functional.
correct.
More what?
Morally correct. It's more morally correct.
Okay, because when I
And
say stable and functional, I sort of mean that as a morally correct.
mm,
But, so how would it be morally correct?
I
Like,
think it's less exploitable too. A little bit easier to execute.
I get that. I mean, when you have programs, they can be exploited. Um, that's for sure. You know, you gotta clean your room. You got a dog in there.
Yeah, I know, right?
um, but oh, two.
Yeah, two
Dang.
dogs.
Um, yeah. So it's morally correct in like what way? So it's less exploitable, but that doesn't make it morally correct necessarily. Like just because there are ways people could do immoral things with Medicare, Social Security, and so on, doesn't mean it's like a net thing.
You're not wrong. Yeah, I'm not like UBI is not a hill I'm willing to die on to replace welfare, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
But what's the part you're not willing to? Okay, so you don't think it's that important to get rid of
I guess I've become a little bit less radicalized in that sense. I still think that they should be gotten rid of. I think I have to put an
Medicare? Have
end
you
to
ever?
this. It's gonna cause a little bit too much.
Oh, do whatever you gotta do.
You
Yeah,
you
I
can
mean,
hear it, right? Yeah.
oh no, it's super. No, it's barely audible. It's
Oh,
just
okay.
you.
Okay.
Um, how? So have you ever known anyone who was like on Medicaid, Social Security, and like not exploiting it and just needed the help?
Sure. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah, I'm just curious because not everybody knows.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
I just I'm not really for the like redistributionism idea. Um, take from the rich, give to the poor. Even though that's essentially what a UBI is.
yeah. So how do you make sense of that?
I think a
'Cause-
UBI only makes sense in a world where there isn't any demand for laborers. Like there's plenty of supply, but there's no demand for people to come and work jobs. So in a state where we can achieve something next to full employment, which I think is what we have today, there isn't a need for some sort of gigantic government redistribution program. But in a future where people don't need, or I'm running a business, I don't need people in order to make it run, that seems problematic because people will starve, but before that they'll probably have some sort of violent coup.
And the same could be said for the climate change effect.
Could be.
Really, and that's not to bring it back to that, but that's my whole point with when we're talking about negative consequences. It's like so much more than...
I agree with you. I think that's a huge destabilizer, which perhaps we don't need to go here. We've gone here before. I've always found it interesting if you have that viewpoint that you don't own a gun.
Well, I'm not against owning a gun, and I'm not against people owning guns.
Yeah, but the idea of owning a gun isn't going to help you come apocalypse.
No, but I'm just saying, like, me personally, I don't own a gun because I would rather be murdered. That's genuinely just how I feel.
Is that coming from a place of experience, or?
No, I've never been murdered before. No.
My guess is you'd probably change that feeling if push came to shove.
Look, I'm not gonna not fight back, but I can't see myself shooting someone, and if someone broke into my house with a gun, I would probably try to take it from them, point it at them, and get them to leave. But like, if they seriously tried, I would try to do that. I'm not saying I would simply disarm them. But anyways, my point is like, yeah. So I don't own a gun because I don't care enough about self-preservation that I think I need, and I'm not like thinking I will need it. So it's a combination of like, I don't think I need a gun to preserve myself, and if I do, I don't want to live that life.
I understand.
But anyway, yeah. What were we? Like, yeah. So and as far as like a big UBI or anything, as with any government thing, it should be like particular and specific to a specific thing as much as possible and not overly broad. But like, yeah. So you would potentially support like paying, like giving, if we did invest a lot more in like renewable energy, we'd have to like give the all the people working in the fossil fuel extraction industry would be displaced by UBIs.
Alaska does something like this already.
Yeah.
They just like give a check to the people who live in Alaska. That's a portion of what value gets extracted in the form of oil reserves in Alaska.
What do you think of that?
It's great. What better way to distribute a natural resource than something like that? We were watching last night. Have you ever heard of the show on Netflix, Dirty Money?
I think I've heard of it.
You would like it, so you should watch it. It'll make you pissed off, but it's very well done. So this one was about gold. So dirty gold as a money laundering device for... I'm going to calm them down a little bit. Boys!
Yeah, do what you gotta do.
Thank you. As a money laundering device. So let's say you're a big cocaine cartel kingpin in Colombia, and you have $1 million and you have that from selling cocaine. You want to buy a house in Miami, but you can't, because if you do, the IRS comes after, whatever. So you have to clean the money. So what they'll do is purchase a whole bunch of gold coming out of, for example, Peru, directly from the mines that it comes from. And then they will sell that gold to a gold distributor in the United States. And they get clean money at that point. And all it takes is finding a gold distributor, a wholesaler, that isn't doing their due diligence and checking to make sure that the gold is coming from legitimate sources. Fascinatingly, it appears as though most of the gold coming into the United States, including gold going to the U.S. Mint, is coming from these illegitimate sources. So it's actively being investigated, but kind of interesting. So what it got me thinking about is I'm looking at these very low paid workers that are making roughly 11, 12 US dollars a day to do hard physical labor in South America. Why I was thinking about like why do these countries, some of these countries in South America, tilt so much towards this like cartel driven like feudal state where at least in the documentary they were also mentioning how some of the people who are at the top of these illegal gold extraction schemes are politicians at the highest levels of government in South America. So I'm like, all right, what's different? It's the people aren't different. They have the same human nature as like westernized countries. And this is not me saying that westernized countries don't have corruption, but it's not quite to that level. So I was thinking like, okay, why? I thought back to a CGP Grey video, really good YouTuber that I had seen a while ago called The Rules for Rulers. Talks about like how power structures emerge and like what drives them. Really good video. I think you'd like it.
Sure.
Like base point is that places that have they're very rich in natural resources are more likely to be exploited for this kind of relationship where you have a cartel running it because they don't have to create some sort of culture where people can go get educated and people can go work in an office and have this like stable social relationship. They can just point a gun at people and through fear say pull this thing out of the ground, and that's enough to run a society. So I think what I'm trying to say is like the curse of having natural resources often can be exploited into this sort of fear ruled dictatorship or like autocracy. I don't know what word is appropriate.
Or like an oligarchy type of thing.
Sure. And in this scenario, I think that I genuinely had my like first original thought of like capitalism isn't always fair. And I'm a gigantic proponent of capitalism, you know that, and the free market.
Sure.
But I was looking at these places and was like, you know, what are the people who are extracting these resources and profiting through fear actually doing in terms of adding value? And I don't think they are. I think they just had first mover advantage. It's like the first person who knew the lay of the land and had enough money to set up an operation just gets the stuff out of the ground and they make money off of it. It's not like they invented a new tool that's getting it out of the ground faster or cleaner or safer. It's just like whoever has the biggest gun, so to speak, gets to pull it out of the ground. And that is totally unfair, morally bankrupt, etc. And I mean, other than a fleeting sense of indignation, I didn't really do anything with that feeling. But
well, no, you're to go back to I think what made you say it is your idea that in some way the profits should be distributed to the people.
Thank you for bringing it back to that. But yes, that seems like a fairer way to do it. Like essentially socializing a natural resource, because I think that something that's like it just was there before the country existed. Socialize that. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, man, like I definitely like I'm not against people like profiting from innovation or like absolutely like creativity. Like I like, I think people should be incentivized to use their creativity and help the world and help people accomplish services or tasks or whatever and get money for it. But your point is that a lot of times it's not about that. It's just about might or, being the first one there or whatever it is. And regardless of the country, I think that's a really good point. Like, how do we, like, people working for minimum wage or below minimum wage, it's not like they're, that's all they can do or they deserve to be doing that or something like that. It's just like, this is how things currently are, so what harm does it do to try to, so I guess the question is, how do you figure out industries where you would want to do that? Like, how do you choose where exploitation is reached a certain level where it's worth doing that?
I don't know. That's a good question. Natural resources seems like the obvious one.
Sure. I mean, that would be great. And would it be worth doing in the U.S. too, where you have like, say, some huge, Exxon Mobil or whatever, like, should they be, paying percentage of their profits to their workers.
I think a slightly different model for something like that. What really bothers me about Exxon's just a name recognition, easy one to target. I think they deserve flack, but I don't think they're the only ones.
No.
What really bothers me as a, I guess, right-leaning libertarian is that the externalities that companies like Exxon impose on everyone else are not captured in any sort of economic sense.
Right.
The guy driving a diesel truck that rolls coal on you at a stoplight is not paying for the particulate that he's putting into the air. There is no premium he's paying to the people that he's harming by doing that. That really bothers me, because that's other people choosing something for their life and imposing that on you. And that's really no different than when a business is able to exploit something like that. You know, if they're like agriculture is a great example. Like people who are raising cows, like they're meeting a need for meat that people want, but they're also putting a shitload of methane, which is a tremendously powerful greenhouse gas, many times that of CO2, into the atmosphere, and they're not paying extra for that. There's no methane tax. That bothers me.
Totally. And I guess the only way to rein in those externalities is through some sort of rule.
Yeah, point the government gun at them. That seems like an appropriate time to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think it's important to have consequences for your actions and not just get away with, whatever you want to do. It's not good for anyone.
Could I ask how you feel about this when it comes to healthcare?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to lay a trap. I really just thought about it while we were talking.
So the analogy would be like like a healthcare company or like an insurance company or.
If you're a fat smoker, you should pay more than someone who's healthy and fit.
For what?
For health insurance.
I don't think this is an analogy.
The analogy that I'm making is that externalities are being imposed on other people, and other people are picking up the cost. They're picking up your tab.
Mm-hmm. It just gets into questions like why does a person smoke? Why are they overweight? Should everyone who is overweight and smokes be treated the same? And also, why are we comparing like an individual to a company when the amount of externalities has got to be really different in magnitude? I mean,
but I was using the example of an individual choosing to drive a diesel truck that has very poor emissions regulation.
Oh, okay, I see. So
I think those are all fit in the same bucket in my mind.
But I don't think individuals should be prevented from driving diesel trucks.
I don't think so either. I just think they should pay some sort of tax for what they're doing to everyone else around them.
I'm not sure I agree, actually. I think my feeling would be that companies producing diesel trucks should be the ones paying those fees. I'm not sure. It's just my intuition. I don't know that I necessarily think it does good to have individual people paying for that. Because, what about people who just don't have a ton of different options in what they can buy? I don't know that I feel that that's people's individual, responsibility to pay that sort of fee.
In that example, though, it's not the buying of the truck that's doing the damage or imposing the externality on other people. It is putting a gallon of fuel in there and then burning through the fuel.
Right.
So it wouldn't make sense to impose it on the manufacturer of the vehicle.
Yeah, but why are those? I don't know. What good does it do to disincentivize someone from driving that if it's not easy for them to go find another one that's more affordable?
Good point.
Yeah.
Isn't this sort of the argument of why should we invest in renewables when other countries are still going to do hydrocarbons cheaper?
I don't think so, because I'm saying if there isn't a great alternative, but with the why should we do renewables thing, I feel like the alternative is to like there are diplomatic, like I don't know what they are, but I assume there are international like diplomatic ways to try to influence what other countries do. So I'm not saying like just do nothing and let other countries do what they want to do. I think the analogy, I think maybe an analogy about externalities would be like, how does a how does like a health insurance company or how does a health insurance company profit so much from providing people health insurance? I think that's like an interesting question. Like, why is that such a profitable industry for them? And what are they creating? Maybe there's not an externality of like pollution, but they're creating like enormous costs, both for providers, hospitals, and and uh, individuals. And I don't know how you rein that in, but I think the answer is just like you're talking about government regulation of like polluters being worthwhile sometimes. I think you aim the gun of the government at health insurance companies, like you do with something like the Affordable Care Act, and you say, oh, you have to provide coverage to these people and these people. You basically force them to uh, lower their costs. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think the analogy works if you look at the externalities for healthcare as costs. But in your example, I wouldn't put the blame for that on individual people who might not be making like perfect health decisions. I Because that gets into way too much complexity about why people make the health decisions they make, which can all be treated the same way. So I don't know that there's an effective way to aim the government gun at individual people for something like what you're
I
doing.
think those are two separate issues. I think that they're both true. I think that individuals do impose externalities on others through their own health choices, and that health insurance, but also insurance more generally speaking, is an inefficiency from an economic standpoint that results in higher prices on average. But
I don't know. Yeah.
no, you can go ahead.
No, I don't. I don't. I agree. I agree. I mean, they are different things. I just don't know, like, what would the net effect be of, for example, like making overweight people pay more for healthcare? Like, do you think it would disincentivize people to become overweight? Because I don't believe that. Like, it genuinely would not work, in my opinion. It would potentially just make people have less money to buy healthy food or do the, or take care of themselves.
Yeah, I think it would incentivize them to lose
I don't
weight.
know. Yeah,
What
but
about what if airlines charged you based on mass rather than existence at like being a
then
person?
fat people would fly less.
Good for the environment.
I mean, not. I mean, but that's not the point.
I
That's
know.
just an unrelated thing. Like, it's. I don't think incentives work that way a lot of the time. I think that sort of negative reinforcement of saying you can't do this if you're X, Y, and Z. I don't think that often incentivizes people to make
That's not
the
can't. That's just more expensive.
but you're true, but you're taking something further away. You're not taking it away, but you're making something more difficult.
Isn't that the same argument
Yeah.
that we were using for businesses though? Like in the case of levying taxes on them for imposing carbon costs on everyone else,
Yeah.
for example.
But I
Is the
think the
distinction
difference.
business versus person?
No, yeah, but I also think that people's like decisions about how they take care of themselves and their bodies shouldn't be something that's factored into their access to transportation, basically. Like on principle, I think everyone should have the right to, equal right to transport themselves around without having to pay a fee for being, you know, certain type
Guys,
of way.
Should
And I think your argument that it would make people make healthier decisions, I think that's empirically false. Like my argument is not even that it's wrong. I don't think it's true.
hmm.
So I don't think it's true that people make decisions like that. I mean, fat people deal with so much shit already, dude. Like they go to their doctor and their doctor makes things about their weight when it's not even related. And I think that type of thing is like unhealthy and just makes people not want to go to the doctor because they want to be, they want to be seen as like okay how they are. If they're fat, fine. Doesn't mean it's the cause of every health issue that they deal with. I don't think shaming fat people is healthy.
Is that how you view what I was doing? Shaming fat people for being fat?
I'm not saying you're shaming fat people. I'm just saying, like, I think if you instituted a system where people would have to pay more, for something because of their weight,
Guys,
like there's no actual reason. Like, I think it's if the goal is to try to get them to make healthier decisions, I think that's sort of just shaming.
Have we talked about this one? Like the fact that you pay more, I guess at the moment you don't, but like males paying more for car insurance than females?
Right.
Is that problematic in your view?
I don't know. No, I mean, I don't know. I guess I assume if it's like because like males actually like cause more car accidents, like
They do.
yeah. I can't really argue with that. I don't think.
But obese people cause higher health costs on average.
For other people.
No, for their health insurance provider.
But their provider gets paid. I mean, everybody's getting.
Hold on. So, if you are, how do I put this?
They're creating costs for themselves. Just like my bad health decisions create health costs for myself.
Some costs for yourself, but most of the costs are going to be defrayed by the aggregate. Everyone else is going to pay for your health missteps. So, like if you screw up and you get a gigantic surgery, you may have a deductible that's a few thousand, but if the surgery is a few $100,000, you're not going to pay that out of pocket.
But that payment would come from. I mean, I don't know. Like, who do you think's paying that?
Everyone else who isn't using their health who isn't using healthcare. That's the basis of how insurance is just structured.
Yeah, but in a strict sense, it's the insurance company paying, right? Like, just I'm not
In a literal sense, it's a disbursement from the insurance company. Yes.
If they're paying and they're making huge profits, you're saying that they're just passing on the cost to other people who are paying for it.
Yes.
So what's the solution there? You think it helps to make to not have insurance at all, or because
two separate arguments, but yeah, I think so. I think that would be better, but specifically the argument or the comparison that I'm making is between car insurance and health insurance. And if we're okay discriminating based on characteristics that people can't choose, like being a male or a female, then we certainly should be discriminating based on things that people can choose, like smoking.
yeah, I just think you'd probably want to know like what percent of the time there's like these huge costs. What percent of the time is it because it's something someone could choose, and what percent is it something someone couldn't choose? You would grant that there's a lot of times it's something someone couldn't choose.
You mean like a genetic predisposition?
I mean, you get into a car accident, you have a surgery, you have like a bunch of surgeries, or I mean, or a predisposition. Yeah, a million different health issues that just come at it. Just being a healthy person can be expensive. I mean, people are born with different conditions, so they develop them over the.
Sure, but we're speaking in averages right now, not specific cases.
That's why you need to know how much of a percent it really is that people are causing their own health issues.
Okay, so obesity, for example, that's 99.9% of people causing that to themselves. There's very few people that have a legitimate thyroid issue, and no matter how little they eat, their body is screwing up how much hormone it's giving them.
I don't think thyroid issue is the only sort of like non-choice related thing that could make someone overweight.
What are some other ones?
I mean, I'm not an expert, but like people eat for a million different reasons. Like someone, I don't even know if overeating is a part of obesity for everybody.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know
It's
that that's true, man.
I do. I mean, it's simply at the end of the day a caloric balance. How much did you expend each day? How much did you intake each day? That difference is whether or not you gain weight or lose weight.
So your point is that every you think almost everybody who's overweight, it's their choice to be over.
I am definitely willing to die on that hill, yeah.
Okay, I don't know if that's true, man. I think there are probably a lot of people who are overweight and want to be not overweight and find it extremely difficult to get there. Why is that? I don't know. It's a lot of different reasons. Probably lifestyle, you know, the role of food in someone's life, access to healthy food. Is it someone's fault if they don't have a lot of money and don't live in a place with healthy food and they can't afford healthy food?
Absolutely not their fault
So what
whatsoever.
should they do?
Eat less.
That's not healthy, man.
I'm not sure what you mean. It,
Well, it's not healthy to necessarily eat less when you're having trouble like getting healthy food. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, if I eat less of unhealthy food, like that they still have to fill themselves up. And unhealthy food is still gonna, be harder for you to process in a way that works to your body's advantage. But I think you should look at. So, do you think there are systemic reasons for? Since you seem to, be passionate about this issue, do you think there are systemic reasons why, the U.S. is so overweight as we are and stuff like that? Or do you put it all in an individual choice?
if you look at it from a systemic standpoint, I think that there are reasons why um, certain populations are fatter than others. Like, it's not just chance that the United States and Mexico are fatter than other countries on
Right.
average. I think there are reasons for that that incentivize it up and down. However, short of someone compelling you to stick a cheeseburger in your mouth at gunpoint, ultimately the choice is in the individual. I think that if you're looking specifically at an individual, like a child, they don't have any agency in what they do and don't purchase, what they do and don't put into their body. I mean, some limited agency, but not really. If they're raised eating McDonald's 3 times a day, that's what they're probably going to see as normal. But there's an adult in there somewhere choosing to do that for them.
So, at what point? Because we can probably both agree there are millions of Americans who grew up eating unhealthy food, and
Definitely.
it wasn't their fault, and they became overweight, and it wasn't their
It
fault.
was their parents' fault. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time I
So,
see like a super fat little kid, I get really pissed off at their parents
sure, but like, how do you? At what point does it become the kid's responsibility?
when they're an adult.
So when they turn 18, now they have the choice to
Yeah, I
to
mean
have.
when their food decisions are no longer being made by someone else. When they start to make their own food decisions for themselves. Yeah. And I'm not arguing that it's difficult to I'm not trying to say that it's easy to change a lifetime of what you've been taught and used to, but information is readily accessible. It's not like there's um, hidden health nutrition stuff. It's quite easy to learn through some Google searches what is not healthy, what you do and don't need in a day, and no one's forcing you to eat shit, and there's not nicotine in McDonald's.
It's not, but the question of how easy it is to change your habits is pretty important because, like, even though no one's forcing you, you're forced by the habits that weren't your fault that you developed as a kid. How much you're forced, I'm not saying you're 100% forced, but there's an addiction aspect to this. I'm sure you would agree. Um, it could be looked at in the model of addiction, not for everyone, obviously, but for some people, food serves a similar role as to like a reward in an addiction. So,
100%. I mean, what's more
yeah,
like biologically ingrained in you other than like food is one of it's probably the greatest reward you can think of, period. It equals
yeah.
sustenance.
So let's say, what if we made your principle apply to people who were addicted to drugs, where healthcare costs more for someone who is addicted to drugs. Would you support that?
I think generally speaking, yes. I mean, so smoking I would say is an addiction to a drug. So in that
Sure.
case, yeah, I would look at it that way. Something where rehabilitation really isn't possible without some sort of external help or intervention, like in the case of something like heroin, I think is in the territory of like a mental health issue that ought to be taken care of as a society rather than as an individual. But something like a cheeseburger should be on the individual. And I think that there is a line in between those two, somewhere along the scale from French fries to heroin. I think it stops being individual. But yeah,
Because of the degree of addiction
I
or like
think
the
so.
level.
Yeah, I think like the way in which molecules hijack your brain, like the profoundness of the chemical impact that a substance has on your brain. Yeah, I think that's I guess how I'm drawing the cutoff.
So if the government was forming policies in line with this, you would think that they should like talk to like neuroscientists basically to figure out,
I think so. Yeah,
yeah,
I think
how
so. Like maybe let's look at another example. Like weed is a drug and it's not physically addictive, but it is habit forming like anything else. If someone's like not able to get through a job interview or like get to their job on time or something and they're smoking a whole bunch of weed, like I don't see that as big weeds problem or like the like society's issue that that person can't
Sure.
get it together. Like I see that as an individual choice that that person has made.
Right, and they're facing externalities of not being able to hold down a job or, looking bad to their, coworkers and stuff like that. And so the question is, should there be another externality of them having to pay more for healthcare? Because smokers and fat people deal with a shitload of externalities already. You know, I guess I wonder, like even just smokers, because I don't think you have to look at something like heroin or whatever. Even something, I mean, there is this legitimate question about choice when it comes to smoking, even just cigarettes. I'm not saying it's not people's choice. I think it's a very fascinating question. Is it like at what point is it someone's choice? At what point is it not? Sort of gone through phases where I'm like kind of hooked on smoking cigarettes, like years ago when I was in college. It was a choice, but like I get how if I was more addicted, it wouldn't have been. Like, because it's happened. But anyways, the question is like even just cigarette smokers, what benefit is had from them paying more for health? Because I don't think that's a good use of the government gun. Basically, is my point in a nutshell. I think it's a good use of the government gun to point it at companies who are doing harm to the environment because of the magnitude of harm to people who are innocent. I think if your point is correct about people paying higher healthcare costs, basically I reject that. I don't think people's higher healthcare costs are due to other people's bad decisions. I really don't. I think I can understand your argument that that would logically raise the cost. I don't think that's at all a main driver for the higher cost of health insurance. So I don't think the magnitude of issues makes it worthwhile to point the government gun at people. I think it can be better pointed at. I think pointing the government gun at health insurance providers to force them to provide as good health insurance as possible to as many people as possible for affordable prices does more good, including to people who are dealing with, you know, mental health, physical health issues.
So the Obama administration would disagree with you. I just googled it while you were saying that.
Oh yeah, what did they do?
They allow so through the Affordable Care Act, it allows insurance companies to charge smokers up to 50% more for the premiums that they pay. Granted, that's self-reported, so I don't know who would self-report that, but
So smokers pay 50% more premiums under the Affordable Care Act.
if they self-report it, yeah.
I completely disagree with that. Yeah, I don't think that's very. Yeah, yeah, and that's part of why the Affordable Care Act didn't go far enough at all, and why yeah, I mean that's a small part of it, but yeah, I don't see why smokers should have to pay higher premiums. I don't think it helps them quit. I
Hmm.
think they should just have really good access to the means of quitting. What's the nicotine
And
gum, and
and
there are many
everyone else should pay for that, for them to get
it's very
access to it.
negligible. I I think that's why we pay for things to try to help people. Like I don't think that a big part of my healthcare costs is other people's bad decisions. Really, that's my point. I think the main drivers of healthcare costs in the U.S. are aging population and bureaucratic mess related to all the different health providers we have. Um, all the carriers for insurance basically like adding a huge amount of red tape. I think if it was the government doing what insurance companies are doing, I think you'd be totally against because they add so much red tape to the process of people just getting their needs met. But yeah, on the base level, there's this disagreement about like incentives. I don't believe that it works in a lot of cases to make someone suffer more for their decisions if suffering makes it harder for them to get the help they need. If me facing consequences helps me, take accountability and change my behavior, it's good. But if it makes me suffer more and less able to overcome that barrier, then it's yeah a net negative, I guess.
Okay.
What you're looking at?
On the same topic, it made me think of it. I'd thought about it earlier, but on the topic of like who owns liability, there's a current event I wanted to talk to you about.
Sounds good.
The settlement for the Sandy Hook shooting. Have you heard about this?
I think I might have seen like a headline, not really. Yeah.
Do you remember the Sandy Hook shooting? You know what I'm
Oh
referring
yeah,
to?
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So the families of 9 of the victims from the Sandy Hook shooting settled for $73 million against Remington, which
Oh wow.
is the maker of um, the specific model of AR-15 used in the Sandy Hook shooting.
Right.
I have my opinions on this. I want to hear yours. Do you want more info before
Yeah,
forming an
like
opinion?
why like so what was the basis of that? Like why did they view it as fair to hold the company accountable?
Um, the families
Is it
contended that Remington violated state law by promoting the weapon with an approach that appealed to so-called couch commandos and
right?
troubled young men like the gunman who committed the Sandy Hook massacre.
So if I remember correctly, I have actually seen some of this stuff. So it was like advertisements basically like you want to be a man, get your fucking Remington and we will go like that sort of vibe like in their
I
advertisements.
suppose
But they're
so. I haven't actually seen those specific commercials. They sound cool, but
But the point of the lawsuit is they would not necessarily be held accountable, Remington, if their advertisements were, here's a dangerous weapon, you may purchase it if you'd like, sir.
I can't say that I know the details of it to make some sort of judgment like that. I don't know.
But it's not about them producing a gun, it's about how they market it, is the point of the lawsuit.
It's a really good point. I don't know.
Okay. Because since I was a kid, I've always felt like marketing needs to be reined in. I am a big believer in it's not okay to lie to people or in marketing. In this case, it's not necessarily lying. Is there something wrong with a gun company marketing itself as you would like I don't know, a video game? Like, come on, like let's fucking go. I think that's a problem.
Yeah,
Now, that's it. What we have
I'm
here.
cool with that. I'm cool with that.
Well, yeah, this shooting you could say is an externality of a company doing business like.
That's a really tough sell.
You gotta accept there are fucking people like this, whoever the shooter was, that are gonna do this type of shit when you market like that. You know?
That are going to do this type of shit when you market like that. Yeah,
If
but
you
not because you market like that. That's a deranged individual that simply
sure.
needed access to a firearm in order to enact that vision.
Right.
I seriously doubt that it was because he saw a commercial that
Oh, for
he did
sure.
that.
for sure. I don't think he was like radicalized by the commercial, but given how many uh, people are unstable and willing to commit murder or on the edge of willing to commit murder, what should we do about that? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Whose job is it to stop those people? I think we should. I think you should pay a fine for committing a mass shooting. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I don't like whose job is it to stop things like this? Like you can't put it on the individual because they're fucking unstable and they can't be relied on for anything. So, what do you think? What do you think should have been done differently? I guess in this case.
I don't see how the manufacturer has any liability whatsoever. I mean that's it's like the same argument of I see it as tantamount to like a gigantic semi, or maybe not a semi truck, a gigantic passenger truck um, crushes a family of four in a Civic in a car accident, and the extended family sues Dodge or Chevy for marketing such a ridiculously oversized truck that people really just don't need on the road. Excuse me, on the road. It just doesn't seem proportional to me at all.
But the argument here is not that the gun doesn't need to be on the market. It's
No,
that
it's
it
that.
doesn't need.
Yeah,
Yeah, like if Dodge marketed their truck with advertisements where you're driving over other cars, and they didn't put that little like obligatory whatever stunt, don't do this, and then someone did that, I think there's a legitimate legal case against a company. I don't know. Is it moral as well? I think so. I don't know. I mean, there's so what limits do you think are fair on the marketing of companies? Because I think that's something I've always just been so interested in. I fucking hate that commercials are allowed to just do whatever they want. And like and we pretend like it doesn't manipulate
they're not
people.
though. There's rules that they have to abide
Right.
by. I'm kidding.
And
Yeah, no,
no, right, right.
the fact, like,
But
look at the fact that we even have drug commercials. That's nuts. People go to their
100%.
doctors. They're like, "Hey, I saw Ambien works great.
Yeah.
What were these 45 symptoms that they said, these side effects? Oh, don't worry about
Yeah.
those. Oh, okay. Yeah, like, okay, you
Yeah.
don't have to look past like the guy saying the fine print really fast at the bottom of an ad to be like, "Wow, that doesn't seem like kosher."
Should not be allowed. So do you agree? So I literally think fine print like it should not be
It
allowed.
doesn't
I
do
think it's
anything.
all
It does
yeah, it should have
absolutely nothing.
yeah. It's so fucking annoying. Like if there's gonna be regulation for something, make it like effective or reasonable in the slightest
Here,
degree.
here, man. This is why I
Because
think regulators are mostly useless.
but they're useless because of the interplay of private industry and public.
Could be, could be, could be
Like,
because there's a
you know,
commingling. I'm open to that.
yeah, I'm sure at some point, I don't know with commercials, but something starts off as a legitimate thing, it gets smaller and smaller and quieter and faster each year, as people lobby to have it change. But so what should be done to prevent mass shooting or minimize mass shootings? I think is like an interesting question because it's such a hard to control thing by definition.
You see the Sacha Baron Cohen like Who Is America thing where they're arming toddlers with guns.
Right. Yeah.
Probably not that.
Probably not.
It's a tough thing to try to solve. I'm not sure that it's reasonably solvable without giving up an unconscionable level of freedom. I think it is something that is perhaps a danger inherent to living in an excessively free society.
How much freedom was taken away if we just look at Sandy Hook? Do you think about it that way as well? Like,
Uh, I guess. I mean, I generally just think of it as like lives taken away, which is worse than
life,
taking away people's freedoms. But like
yeah, I
you
mean, you
know,
could just think of like the freedom to, yeah, be
to be unmurdered.
to be unmurdered, yeah, and the freedom to have your kids be unmurdered and your community be safe. I mean, obviously, those are things we all care about.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you protect those?
Sometimes you can't.
But don't you feel that a choice is being made? Like, if a society says like these freedoms are more important than the others, that's sort of evident
It's
in
a
the
value
discussion.
judgment. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree you can't stop like shootings, but would it minimize them to, I don't know, like have greater restrictions on buying certain guns that make a mass shooting more possible? I I see no problem with that. What's the downsides of people having to go through more background checks to buy an AR? I don't give a shit.
Do you think more background checks would be a useful solution? I mean, throw something out there that you have as a solution.
Yeah,
Maybe I support it.
more background checks is like the bare minimum. I just don't know enough about this. Certainly, yeah, like no domestic violence, like perpetrators owning guns, like um, I don't know, maybe making the age higher, making I don't know, like I'm really not a super expert in it, but I imagine that people study this produce well educated opinions about it. But in general, like if your thinking is other people owning guns, because you bring up the babies owning guns, obviously you're joking. But I think we've talked about this type of thing, and if your thinking is well, other people owning guns, having more access to owning guns prevents, in theory, this type of stuff. That's another a situation where I just say empirically, I just don't think that's true. I don't know that that's true. That people owning guns, can stop this type.
Are you specifically zoning in on mass shootings where you have some deranged individual shooting innocents?
Well, just because that's what you brought up, but as far as I mean, yeah, just with shootings in general, yeah, I mean, obviously it's a problem.
Because shootings in general are not that. So I
Right, of
just want
course,
you to
yeah,
be clear on which one.
yeah, like, but there are so many guns, and it's like, what do you do? I guess I'd be a fan of like a. I think Australia did like a government buyback program.
I read I don't, not in preparation for this, but a few days ago I
Yeah,
read like the entire Wikipedia page on Australia's gun
really.
control program. Yeah.
Well, then you know a lot more about that. Was it effective or?
That's a tough one to say. They certainly haven't had mass shootings since. They did take a shitload of guns away from the people. I think I
They
probably would
bought them.
say it was effective. Um, they bought some of them. Yes, they allocated a few $100 million, if I remember correctly. Um, so they imposed a tax on people, raised like $500 million, and then used like 300 million of it to buy back guns, and I think they just kind of kept the other 200 million. Um, so rainy day fund, and yeah, bought back pretty much everything that wasn't like a bolt action rifle, and even then you needed like a specific hunting permit, generally speaking,
Yeah.
for something like that. And if you didn't, it was a crime, um, to keep
And this
it.
is a stupid question, but people can't just go use that money to buy more guns because they stop the sale of guns in some capacity or
I have to assume that, yeah. um, yeah, that is a critique of some of the buybacks that have been proposed in the United
you
States.
have to.
Because
Yeah, you
you
definitely
can create a firearm too. There's like that,
right.
like a pipe and a trigger mechanism can qualify as it, so you can like game the system. Anyway,
Right.
um,
No, but like still, super few number of people who know how to do that, and so you minimize the risk of.
so it's like
I would be a yeah.
it's an argument that that is a policy that you could enact that could perhaps reduce mass shootings
And maybe shootings in general.
and maybe shootings in general. My personal opinion, this experiment hasn't been done in America. My personal opinion is that there are too many guns for this to be done effectively. There are too many borders with countries, specifically Mexico, that I guess there's only two direct borders, but the border with Mexico would cause a huge problem in terms of the black market for guns, making this policy somewhat ineffective, and that taking the guns away from law abiding citizens would be significantly more effective than taking the guns away from people who were planning on using them for murder. the crime of
Yeah.
having an illegal gun is nothing compared to murdering someone. So if you truly were
Right.
going to do something nefarious with it, you're certainly not going to give it back to your government willingly.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't think it should be argued that like because everything can't be done, nothing should be worth being done. But I get that part of your argument is like there are people, like just the bad people. Like more of the people trying to harm people would have guns and less of the people. Um, I I assume that's why it's a very multifaceted approach. Like you would need to do a lot of different things. I don't know what you would do. I wouldn't necessarily want to like raise the punishment for being caught with a gun because that's just people sitting in prison longer, and I don't think that necessarily helps anyone. Um, I like the idea of a buyback because it's very voluntary. You say like a shitload of money, like you could offer like a lot of money. You'd have to raise that money somehow or allocate it. But I like that idea, and I think it would work pretty well. Like a lot of people would be like, "Fuck, I could get $1,000 for this gun or something like that." Like you'd have to like limit, people's ability to buy guns as well, which I think is fair. Um, yeah, at what point, like you don't believe that people have the right to own like a functional tank, I assume, or do you like? Because
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe.
and like should people be able to have drones like or like F-35s and like I don't like the government having a monopoly on all these things, but I just my point is like where the argument that like people can protect our society with these weapons, I don't think is valid. And why should we allow guns? I don't why are non-lethal weapons not enough to have to give people get access to?
Because people with malintent use lethal weapons to enact that.
Yeah, I mean I don't know like why do people do stuff like that and how do you get to like the root of the problem rather than like just trying to
Not, I think we've talked about this before, but I like the adage of nothing stops a bullet like a job. It's like when people
yeah I
have
agree
so much to lose, they don't choose crime. Crime, I think, is
yeah
generally a last resort for some people,
totally
but also a culture as well, which I think we disagree on somewhat. But in the case
yeah
of the mass shooters, I think it's generally speaking a mental health issue where people who otherwise would be institutionalized are instead running free and sometimes get a chance to shoot people.
I gotta pee again and
My
I
good,
too much coffee
my goodness.
I know so you want to take one more break because I'm enjoying
Sure. Yeah,
Right.
I'll play a bullet chess game.
Oh nice sweet okay I'll be right back. How's the game going?
It's pretty good. I did a knight sacrifice on F7.
Oh, that's always risky. Is it working out?
It's pretty even right now. I like my position a little bit better, but
There's some top level games starting too.
are there?
Favorite guys is in it. Vladislav Artemiev. He's So when you talk about culture influencing gun violence, you're talking about like the type of culture that's fostered by like the commercials like Remington puts out?
No.
No, I'm joking. But you do see how that's
funny.
how that is a culture in and of itself, right?
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Like I agree with that for sure. The what do you call it? Like tactical bro persona is not something I'm friendly to.
No, totally. I think it's important when you think about culture to not just think about race or ethnicity, but to think about how do cultures
Whoa. Who said race?
Okay, I know that's what you're indicating. But in reality, that's completely off base. But in reality, if you want to actually look at what cultures do affect gun violence, a commercial like that is a perfect example.
Yeah.
Something like, oh, yeah.
I agree with you.
I'm not saying it literally made this person commit the violence, but it clearly contributes to it. And yeah, I don't know. It's I don't think we should stop like violent shows from existing, but like a commercial in itself, I think can have limitations on it.
I'm generally for like the power that marketing can have is profound on people, especially with repetition over time, especially on children, and I don't think that should be as unfettered as it is, and I think that the regulations that do exist are a joke.
Yeah, I agree. I've just always felt like people downplay like how much commercials influence us.
Because everyone thinks that they project their own self-perception onto everyone else, and we, generally speaking, highly underestimate how much of an impact marketing has on ourselves. That's like I don't know, a proven thing, if you can call it that.
Yeah. Sometimes I see commercials and I'm like, there's no way this actually like is making this company. Like there's like I know marketing executives are getting paid 6 figures to come up with this stuff. Are they just bullshitting the data, or does this actually help? Are they actually showing deliverables to their boss? Or like, because sometimes I'm like, they're just fucking around. There's no way this stuff actually helps sell products. They're just changing how we think. But it's like, is this even selling a product? Like, but I assume it is because of how things work. You have to assume that they're kind of
There's ineffective marketing for sure, though. Not. Yeah. I mean, there are definitely things I can think of that are terrible. I don't know. Do you want to pick like one or two last topics to talk about?
Let's see if I had anything on my mind.
I'm sure as soon as we cut it, I'm gonna be like, oh, I wish I had talked to you about that.
Yeah.
We could talk macroeconomics if you're interested.
I had one thing I thought would be interesting. It's probably not a long thing, and then I'd love to talk macro. We can do that first.
No, go for it.
I was randomly thinking about the whole Monica Lewinsky Bill Clinton, and I thought it would be an interesting thing to talk about with you.
Yeah, sure.
The way, like, how do you remember interpreting that, like, when it happened? Obviously, we were, like, kids, and, like, because my whole point is, like, I remember it being, like, viewing it as, like, her fault. And, like, our culture sort of viewing it as, like, she did something bad. And it's just been really interesting to get older and be like, sure, she had, like, some agency in the matter, but, like, clearly this is... Why are we demonizing this person?
She had an affair with a married man. That is bad. The President of the United States having an affair with an intern? Machine intern?
I forget her exact role.
Doesn't really matter. He's the president. She's a lower ranked person having an affair, sometimes in the Oval Office, sometimes not, and then lying about it to the American people. That is orders of magnitude worse. And so in the public discourse, focusing on what she did instead of what he did makes no sense to me. Is that is that what it was?
Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously we focused on what he did too. He like was almost impeached, right? Or was he impeached?
He was impeached. He wasn't removed from office.
Right, right. So he was impeached. So obviously he was like held accountable. But I just feel like in popular culture, like in media, it was like making fun of Monica Lewinsky and like laughing about Monica Lewinsky. And like, sure, having sex or whatever with a married person is not good, but like that's you have to weigh it and be like, oh, like that's not the main thing that's wrong. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's like pretty small. That happens a million times a day, and the real thing is like, oh my god, the president had, I did this with an intern.
Yeah. So what were you getting at, like public perception?
I just wanted to bring up, like, I just thought it was interesting. I just wondered if you had the same perception of like how popular culture dealt with it, like in terms of like making fun of her, and to a ridiculous degree, basically. It feels like she became the butt of the joke, where like that's not fair given the content.
Yeah, I don't know why that happened. I couldn't really speak to that it happened either. Doesn't make sense to me either.
You don't feel like it did happen even? Or
well, I wasn't like privy to it. I don't know anything about really like how that went. But if what you're saying is true and that it like at all focused on what she did rather than what he did, that doesn't make sense to me.
I just think it was like late night hosts and all the different media making jokes about her, and like it's obviously not warranted. They're not making jokes because she slept with a married man. You know what I mean? They're just making jokes because like she's a woman in the public eye who had sexual relations with the president, and it's just interesting to me that our media sort of like overlooked. I feel like the power differential, which is so obvious to you and me now in 2022. It's like, yeah, that's weird for a president to have sexual relations with an intern. I just feel like that wasn't discussed really from like the ethical standpoint. It was more of like he did a bad job, but like not like did a wrong.
Yeah, I was really surprised when Hillary was running in 2016 that this was not brought up more as like a smear campaign against like I guess like character attacks on either her or her husband, as like you stayed with this, like you promote women's empowerment, like blah blah blah. You're standing next to this guy who really never suffered any sort of punishment for a pretty egregious breach of trust, abuse of power, whatever. It's just like, yeah, no biggie. Like, I'm sure she's got the American people's best interests at heart. Because I don't know, 20 years later, or like 15 years, like 20 years later, I would have thought that would have been drug up as something to smear her and him with, but didn't happen.
Maybe there's enough to smear her with already, but I mean, it's like, it's an interesting question, and maybe it shows that our culture like isn't even as aware of this as like we'd like to think we are as an issue. But we got a comment in the chat. How would the culture today handle the Monica scandal if it happened today? I think that's a great question. I don't obviously know how it would play out, but I would say if you just look at like, I don't know, people like me, or if I was all the people of the culture, what I would think is the right way to handle it would be to not make fun of Lewinsky. Basically to, just hold the president accountable and not make fun. I mean, she was like very young. She was not a child, obviously, but she was very young, and I don't think it makes sense to like make fun of her, or basically it was like slut shaming. It's not just making fun, it's specifically slut shaming. Oh, making jokes about her, doing these sexual acts. And I don't think that's valid when you take into account the power differential or funny. So basically, I think today, if a talk show host made the same jokes about Monica Lewinsky, hopefully people would not find it funny.
You have my support.
Yeah.
We're there's I don't think there's any bit of disagreement there.
It's interesting. It shows how the culture has changed because she's like a more kind of like a more feminist icon now, or is
Is she?
respected as like I believe so, or at least she's like a respected individual. I remember like what's his name, John Oliver, I think interviewed her and stuff.
Maybe
Um,
maybe that is somewhere where we diverge. I guess you didn't say that, but I don't think that having had sexual relations with the president, even though he said I did not, doesn't entitle her to some sort of like feminist champion
that's
status
not what I
either.
mean,
Okay,
dude.
okay.
I just mean like because she went through the public like um tear down campaign of being a woman who was okay. There's a larger question about like should a boss be allowed to have sex with an employee? I think is like a
Allowed like
sort of
legally, or
or how should that be viewed? I guess in society,
I mean,
should it be
people are
viewed
doing it
as
all
a
the time though, like to get ahead. You know, that was up until the rapier parts. That's what Harvey Weinstein was doing. That was like an open secret.
right? Well, then that's a good example. Like how much of a line is there between like consensual sex between an employee and a boss and like power, you know, like so the argument is not that it's inherently well, I think someone could say it's inherently an abuse of power, but it certainly makes abuses of power very likely and risky. Because even if you sleep with your boss to get ahead, now what? You know what I mean? Are you ahead forever, or now do you have to keep sleeping with them? Do you have to keep it a secret? How does your life? So yeah,
All of the times where it worked out, you don't hear about, of course. So there is this like confirmation bias where it's like, oh, it's always horrible. Like sometimes, perhaps it's like, yeah, like done deal. Like we each got what we wanted, and you never hear about it again. Perhaps.
what about the externalities to the other employees? You know what I mean?
Fuck
It's
them,
not
right?
fair.
I mean,
No,
don't, but yeah.
but just like you're talking about other people paying healthcare costs of someone's bad decisions, should other employees have to not be able to get that promotion now because someone's having sex with the boss?
Of course not. I mean, it's
Yeah.
unfair, and it's also an inefficiency because you're then promoting people to places of higher authority and influence, not based on their competence, but you're
Yeah.
Peter principling them based on their ability to perform sexual acts, or I guess willingness to compromise their own morals, which is bad for the organization too.
Well, I don't even blame someone for having sex to like get ahead or get jobs. Honestly, like I don't. I mostly have a problem with the person doing it who's in the position of
Hmm.
power. I don't like. I'm not saying it's not the person's choice. Like it's someone's choice if they want to have sex to get ahead.
But like,
Not that
what's
I'm
the
saying
point of having power then if you're not gonna abuse it? You know.
all the other things, all the other parts of it.
What
Like
makes it
yeah,
power?
what?
What makes it power other than your ability to like boss people around and get them to bend to your will?
Well, there's the question of where's the line where power exercises of power are, not right. But yeah, but I do think that's an interesting question. There's also like me as a creator on YouTube and stuff. I think about this sometimes because there's arguments about like, is it wrong for a creator to hook up with someone who was a fan or is a fan of their stuff?
Like a
So
groupie, you
someone,
mean?
a groupie, someone
Yeah.
who watches all my videos, subscribes to my Patreon, and so on. Would it be wrong for me to hook up with them? I think mostly yes. I think it's almost a black and white issue, but not completely. I don't think it's really black and white because I think at the end of the day, you can judge whether someone's a reasonable adult with boundaries and is making the decision, knowing you get to know. But there could be very many abuses of power, and there have been with creators. Um, and so it's a fair argument that does it open the door to abuse too much to even allow that as an option? Should it be viewed in a black and white? Nope, not happening. And it's the same with an employee or an employer. Should it just be viewed as a black and white? This is wrong because of how likely abuses of power could be. And you're joking about abuse of power. I know you don't want people abusing their power over you.
No,
you're
I
talking
want to
about.
be the one doing the abusing, of course.
Yeah.
It's the nature of power dynamics.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's yeah, interesting stuff. I mean, I think it's a moral question, maybe a legal question, but people, yeah, like yeah, it seems right that when we acknowledge a power differential is significant enough, that we also think a certain type of relationship would be inappropriate.
Hmm.
I think it's part of the reason incest is wrong. I think it might be a main part of the reason incest is
Because
that
there's an
there's
abuse of some sort of other relationship.
yeah, exactly.
So I guess
That other
there the
relation.
what you're positing is that there are certain types of relationships, some power, some not, that
Yeah, or just
shouldn't.
some with more of a power difference. Um, yeah, like fucking, I mean, employer employee, parent child, like 25-year-old, 15-year-old, you know what I mean? Like when we acknowledge that there's a certain level of power difference, it's like, okay, well then we shouldn't allow certain behaviors between those people to be seen as.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means law, sometimes that means social, uh, you know, judgment.
So is there something that you think should be changed? Are you like making a policy proposal?
No, I'm mostly just, I mean, probably if I thought about it, but I'm mostly just saying, like, um, I'm mostly just posing the question of, like, do you think that employers should be, like, do you think there's something inherently wrong with someone, like, sleeping with either employees or whatever potential employees to, um, yeah, do you consider that abusive of power?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think
Exactly.
it's as bad as certain other kinds, but yeah. Maybe I should
And
make
then
like
it's
a.
just,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, please, I don't know.
I was gonna make a joke. I think I should actually like graph all of the different abuses of power that have existed, and like specifically around like sexual missteps.
Yeah.
Like just because I think that the uh, how do I say it? The prominence of some of that stuff coming to light has been like whitewashed together. And I think that not all of them were equal. So I think I want to make like a plot starting with like Louis C.K. and ending at like Bill Cosby or something.
Might have to start a little before Louis C.K. because
I
he
don't mean
legitimately.
chronologically.
No, no,
Oh,
no, no.
oh,
I,
oh, oh,
I,
oh.
yeah, you definitely have to start before Louis C.K.
Like,
because
yeah, I
what
get what
he
you mean.
did,
I get what you mean.
yeah, what he did was like
Biden would be like the first one, like sniffing hair.
no,
Before
Biden's
that,
also no, Biden also fucking is horrible what he's done. Like, I just mean at the beginning should be like Aziz Ansari or even someone who's
yeah,
maybe
okay.
less bad. But
What's less bad than Aziz, but still
well,
like made the public?
like okay, like Um, not yeah. I mean, maybe Aziz is the beginning of it. I don't know. Maybe there are better examples. Like, but yeah, just not like being so not receptive to signals that it
How about like
borders on.
hitting on someone unwantedly when like they're clearly telling you like I'm not interested?
Yeah, I think that's a good
That
point.
count? Is
Yeah,
that like the floor?
yeah, and it's like and that type of thing. It's like shouldn't be illegal. It shouldn't get you banished from your community. But it's like it's a little yeah, it's a little gross. But yeah, Louis C.K. You know, I don't. That's a perfect example for what we're talking about because there is a clear power differential. He's with women who are like new to the industry. He has a lot of power over their career. Is it fair to expect them in that situation to say, "No, I prefer if you don't"? I don't know. It's a worthwhile question. I think yeah. I think it's just it's it's worth putting that pressure on the woman.
Comes down to good parenting, I think.
You don't think Louis had good parents?
I meant for the women to like feel confident enough in a situation to be like, "Fuck off! What the fuck's wrong with you?"
Why
Um,
should it? But
because
is that
no, I don't mean it's like on them, as in like he doesn't have any sort of culpability. I mean, if we want to avoid that, it's important for parents to instill that sense of confidence and agency. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I just don't know what agency is fair to expect when someone's like my entire career. Like literally,
Sure.
dude. In comedy too. Like you're who you know is everything.
But there's
Who's
like, for sure, and there's
yeah.
this, there's an important thing that we should say about the person who's choosing to do something, like to give up some moral ground. Yes, they're doing it because that person's an authority figure, but they're also doing it because some portion of them wants to get ahead, right? In their
It's
career.
or doesn't want to get behind. It's kind of a hard way to know what
Okay,
it is.
sure, but then they're
Yeah.
prioritizing, short of them legitimately fearing for the ability to like sustain life and like put food on their
Sure,
table.
sure.
If it's like status within their career, they are prioritizing one thing over another, and that's a values judgment in and of itself.
And I think I could probably argue that putting food on the table is part of it, honestly. But even if it's not, just that I don't see them giving any moral ground also necessarily by letting. I mean, I guess I could see it argued that way, but I, I mean, it just you have to look at it and say, well, the majority of the issue is with what he did rather than what they did. So whether they could do something differently is kind of irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't know.
Was one of our viewers in the chat really passionate about Asian food? Is that what I was seeing?
I think he meant yeah.
No, whoever it was put it there twice. It must have been about cooking peanut oil at high temperatures in a
Yeah, I've
curved
never cooked with
pan.
a wok.
Can be quite
Yeah.
effective.
Yeah, if for me that's the thing. Like, if people are using woke, like I don't even mean the person in the chat because I sort of get how they're using it. But a lot of times when people are using, woke, I just I tune out sort of.
You write them off. You're like, oh,
No,
this
I
per-.
wouldn't say I write them off, but like I immediately think they're misunderstanding. Like when you have a public speaker like categorizing a whole group of people as woke, it's just those sort of like I think new words don't really help.
Mm. Hey man, that's language for you. It's a constantly moving spectrum.
I don't I don't have a problem with the newness of the word, I should say. I think it's the fact that it's very imprecise and it's
Fair
used
enough.
as a catch-all us versus them.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. I feel the same way about people who make broad aspersions to capitalism, but I feel the same way about woke, or I mean lots of language. I'm generally a fan of precise language. I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should we could we end by giving our viewers a little snippet, like share a favorite piece of media, like a song or something?
Oh, sure. That's an interesting idea. Do you have anything in mind? I don't
Yeah.
know if I have. Oh yeah, you go.
If you guys, I mean, well, you wouldn't be able to hear it, but perhaps the stream could hear it.
Yeah, I can listen too on the stream.
Yeah, tell me if this is coming through or not.
Yeah, it's coming through. Oh, is this you playing? Oh, wow. 55 says beautiful. Thanks, Burger.
Okay. I didn't want to play the whole thing, but just a little taste. That is by Franz Liszt. He's a Hungarian composer, or was. Um,
The Mania.
yeah, Un Sospiro is the name of that song, and the person playing that is Rousseau, spelled like the philosopher, on YouTube. Really, really great stuff there. Yeah, Least
Well, you
Mania.
mentioned, yeah.
Have we talked about that or no?
You've mentioned, yes, and you've mentioned Rousseau, I think, to me. I think you sent me his light up keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's.
yeah.
Yep.
That was it. Yeah. Well, I've had a great time talking, as always. This
Me
is so much
too.
fun.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna go for a walk and eat some food. Not to be
That sounds
confused with a walk, just to be clear.
Gonna go for a walk culture. Yeah, thanks for watching, people. And yeah, I hope we do this again soon. And yeah, oh yeah, let
I'll
me know when
see
you're
you in a
coming
couple weeks.
to town. Yeah, send me the date so I can put it on
I
my
will.
calendar.
I will. Probably
Because I
2.
am going to like Florida at some point. So
Ooh.
you know the date off.
I've heard of that. Yeah, 2 weeks from now, I think.
Perfect. But yeah, text me the date.
Will do.
But yeah, I don't think that's formal.
See
Great
ya.
talking to you, man. Yeah. All right.
Bye.
Bye bye.